Hi, I want to thank you for joining my session of the North Carolina Reading Association's mini conference. My name is Shane Fletcher. I want to share this topic called Reading Don't Get You No Dear. Let me go ahead and get the slideshow going. From time to time, there'll be a couple of audio things that I'll close the video and the mic in order to help make hopefully for the sound to work better for the quality of the video during the presentation. So those couple of times will give me a moment to make those transitions. So Reading Don't Get You No Dear, engaging reluctant male readers through activity, online literature discussion, and multimedia. Who am I? My name is Shane Fletcher. I have a PhD from NC State University in literacy, and I have also master's in reading specialist at UNC Pembroke as well. And I went to Pembroke before that. Before I became a teacher, I had a BA in sociology and went back to get a teacher certification in elementary education. And then later a national board certification as a middle childhood generalist. To give you some idea about experience, I've taught for 20 years. The last 4 years I've been at Central Middle School in Whiteville City Schools. I have taught 8th grade for a couple of years, and the last 2 years I've taught 7th grade. And then before that, I spent 15 years in Union Chapel Elementary School and Robinson County Schools teaching 6th grade. And often I've taught social studies all 15 years, but there was a few times when I did the science and social studies together, and then other times when I taught language arts and social studies. So it just depended on the number of students that we had. And then from time to time, I've served as a reading adjunct in the reading department at UNC Pembroke as well. This gives you a little idea of my background. So our topics today, I want to share with you a couple of things talk about that were relating to a project that I did with my students during my research time for my PhD. We want to talk about defining the word literacy, and during that slide, there'll be a place where you can take the QR code, and if you'll get a phone ready and your camera on your phone can take a picture of that QR code, and you can go perhaps pause the presentation for a few minutes and post answers to the questions. There'll be a couple of slides that come up with that throughout the presentation. The first one being defining literacy. How do we define the word literacy? And let's define that word together and share there. And then I will also have a couple of places where I'll remind you that this is asynchronous, and since this is pre-recorded, the first people who do this presentation will not have a whole lot of comments that have been made on the Padlet, but as you have days that go by, the other people are participating, and if everyone will add on to the presentation in the Padlet, but then go back, plan to come back to the video. You'll have until September 1st, I think, before the deadline, so that they will give you an opportunity to go back and look at what others have added to, and that way you can share and learn from each other as well. And we'll all hopefully have some more learning and engagement in that way, even though it's not live. So the other thing I want to talk about today is engagement, ways to engage your reluctant readers. This research study that I did was with male readers, but of course there will be some things that I certainly hope some folks will share for the other students as well, as you're thinking about how you can engage all reluctant readers. And then we're going to talk about the word agency and using agency through activity to engage reluctant readers and to help develop them to become better readers through the idea and concepts that have to go with the word agency. And then we'll discuss online literature discussion, the research project that I did with my students, and the multimedia type products that they created. And then I also want to share in that meaning making process that you might think about how you might use some of the tools that maybe have come more familiar as this past year with the COVID pandemic, using Google Classroom and G Suite. The programs that are available there. There are lots of different platforms that can be used to use this meaning making process. There's not just one way to do it. The reading don't get you no dear. This was actually a quote from a former student when I asked why he didn't like to read. Though you may have students that are like that as well, that don't like to read, and they just have a lot of reasons that they don't want to read. Some of these are in our society as well, and I will talk about that now. The students often, what is the relevance of reading? Why is it important to them, or should be important to them? And often I think by the time students get to middle school, they've lost their understanding of relevance of reading. Sometimes it's just because of the academic nature of testing and EOG focusing on reading, or end of grade testing focused on reading and scores and needing reading in order to pass and move on to the next level. And so it's often not viewed for enjoyment, seen as something that's time consuming, and sometimes just not as engaging to them as something might be like video games or movie or entertainment industry. The sports, for instance, with this topic with hunting, not getting a deer by reading a book. And of course, the social media, sometimes we're competing with that. And so that, again, that's where this statement comes from, or maybe others like it that you've heard from students as well. And so we're going to challenge that. For me, the challenge in that was I needed to see ways to help my students to find relevance in reading, to develop a passion for reading, and to learn how reading could really help them get that deer or whatever their goal is. So some of the tasks that I underwent with this was redefining and broadening understanding what literacy is, engaging reluctant readers, and having to build confidence in my students as readers. And so the research that was done was American Indian students. The context of this research were Lumbee tribe, sixth grade students, male. They were male students. They were struggling readers, identified themselves as struggling readers, as well as other indicators, academic indicators. And then the context for the research fell under an online literature discussion and response process after having read aloud the book, The Red Pyramid by Rick Riordan in social studies classes, which at the time I was teaching. And then the students created multimedia response products. And at the time it was done in a WikiSpace site. It's no longer one of the sites that's available. Again, like I said, you might consider some other options. There are some other wiki formats, platforms. And then, of course, the G Suite and Google is a great place to kind of take that and use that, especially if that's something you've gotten really familiar with this past school year. And then, of course, it also used an asynchronous chat feature so that they were not necessarily on at the same time and responding to each other. That was one of the things in research that often for students to participate in online discussions, that they needed that opportunity to think about what they're going to say, especially struggling readers, not being hastened as they would be in a classroom setting or in a live setting, so that it gave them the opportunity to read and respond and think about their response. As they considered the questions that were given on the site. So I'll just pause here for just a moment. I ask you to go to this Padlet and look at this, just share what you think the definition of what literacy is. And of course, I encourage you to post your response now. And then again, to come back later and check it out as other people have an opportunity to get on and post their ideas of this definition as we go through the summer months. And I encourage you to come back often and see what other people have added so it can expand what you've learned. I did a quick Google search just for the word literacy. I actually like what came up. For one, it's just a good example of what most people think of literacy as just the ability to read and write, which was the first definition that was given here. But I actually like the second definition that was listed as a competence or knowledge in a specified area. And that kind of helps to understand a little bit more about what we're looking at with redefining literacy. And then I would like to ask you to include in your definition the thoughts about literacy as being communication in print, digital, visual, and oral. That literacy is skills in all of those different areas, skills in life as well, the tools that are used for that communication and learning. If understanding has been gained through that communication in whatever format that we looked at. And then also to think about how technology can inform, and that there are certain skills with literacy with technology, being fluent with different devices and different navigating websites and things like that too. So I just encourage you those in your defining literacy to think about those things. So I want to talk about engagement. So here's some ideas that I would like to share for engaging reluctant readers. Some ways you can begin, like at the beginning of the year, or at a point when you're ready to do to try this. To start with getting to know your students and what their interests are. And one of the ideas is to look at reading interest inventories. And I found one here, just a sample from Scholastic. The very simple reading interest survey that you could use if you haven't used those before. You can do a search for those. You could create your own as well. And another thing that I've done with my students at the beginning of the year to get to know them better is to have them write an autobiography. And that might seem like a heavy project maybe at the beginning, or if it's a class that you're not a language arts teacher, you might not have as much time to devote to that. So there's some other ways to identify some interests. You could have discussions with your students about hobbies that they enjoy. And there's other things that you can look at, like for asking some guiding questions for students to reveal their interest. And they can be done in writing or prompts or exit tickets for class, or some other ways that you might come up with. Things like, what would you do if you had the whole day off today? What would the student do? And that would kind of give you a clue into what they might think about what they're interested in doing. Other things like, what do you do in the summer break? Or you might ask, what do you do during spring break, or a winter holiday break? Or what's your favorite restaurant food? What favorite dessert? What do you and your family do together? If you're home all alone, what would you do by yourself? Those kinds of things will give you a clue into things that the students are interested in. And then there could be some ways you could use this with enhancing technology in the classroom to make quick surveys. If you don't have time for those longer questions, you might just pose a question through a Padlet like we're doing today and have students answer their questions and post them there. You could try a website like Mentimeter, menti.com, and do a poll. And then have that posted up, and it'll give you a quick overview of what your students are interested in, whatever question that might give you a clue into that. You may even think about the question relating to some of the options that you have for the students to read, resources that you have in the classroom. And then maybe a Google form. You could create a Google form. And if you're in a Google Classmeet, you have that option to create a Google poll, and that would be a nice way to do that, to gather that information if you're in a Google Meet, an online setting. And then, of course, there's just the old-fashioned way of having students rate. How many of you like this? Or if you like this, something else that they enjoy, or whatever the question may be. Just have them raise their hand and kind of do a tally in your classroom. It'll give you an idea of some of the things, overview of what your students enjoy across the class. So another thing to really think about, it's important for middle school readers, is building in choice. It really helps to engage readers when they have some options. And so you may think about, if you're doing some novel studies, whether in a social studies class or even science, there may be some related topics in a language arts class. Of course, there's a lot of novel study practice, a lot of novel study ideas that come out through some of the textbook programs, and some teachers already use novel studies for driving their instruction as well. So that's certainly a thing to consider, is how you can provide some choice for that. And so you might do books that are related to a certain topic, and then do a Google form, and then give them the option to choose from those titles to help you set up your groups and to give them some choice in what they have to read. And then there's other ways of offering them some other options for meaning-making practices. So you might try some different things like discussion groups and literature response projects and presentations, and then consider the ways that they can do those things with the digital technologies, video and animation and art, and providing those options will help students get more engaged in that process when they have some choice in how they do those things. In the project that I did with Red Pyramid, I had the students do some activities online in that wiki, and some of the engagement, the ways that I engaged them was through some Vokies, these video avatar driven questions or response or instructions that I gave them in that. And so I'll share one here. I'm going to, for a moment, go ahead and close this video camera and mic so maybe the sound will do better.
Welcome to the House of Life. If you are found worthy and survive the test, you will begin your training. Follow the directions to create your combat magic avatar. Let the testing begin.
Okay, so that related to one of the sections in the story when the characters, Carter and Sadie in the story, were beginning to do their tests when they were at the House of Life in one of the settings in the story early on in the book. And so that kind of gave a way to engage the students in their activities here as they were going to participate in that. Okay. So here I'd like to give you an opportunity again. This is another Padlet that I'm going to have come up several times for the rest of the presentation. So if you want to use the QR code here and go in and share ideas that you have on engaging students in reading and reading activities, I would encourage you to go there and again post now if you could, and then pause this presentation to do that, and then come back to this presentation, and then later on return to the site and see this Padlet and see how things are going there, what other folks have added on the topic of engagement. I want to talk a little bit about agency through activity. Using project-based activities utilize student agency and fosters confidence in reading. So you may not be sure what I mean by the word agency. Some folks may, some others may not. So I'm going to share this link. This is just one place where you can find some information on it. This is the Renaissance programs. You may be familiar with STAR Reading, STAR Math, Accelerated Reader, Accelerated Math programs. And so this company, Renaissance, has this, I like this definition that it said, what is student agency refers to learning through activities that are meaningful and relevant to learners, driven by their interest, and often self-initiated with appropriate guidance from teachers. And so it allows students to have voice and choice, which again is really important for middle school students in their learning process. And it may also help them to engage in skills as they make their decisions. What skills do they have to reach these goals and make their plans for that? And of course, you can go to this website and read through this more and do some other research if you would like to on that topic. And again, it's this thought that it's this personalized learning, and that when students have this personalized learning, I'm sorry, I didn't have that site linked when I read that, so I'm going to scroll back down here just so you can see how it starts out. And so again, it's this U.S. Department's definition of personalized learning. Agency falls under that concept, and so it's a great way to come and understand how you can engage your students in personalizing their learning and taking responsibility, and in so doing, it helps to build that engagement when you're using their agency, when you tap into that. And so in the personal research that I did, some of the things that agency came out for that were the skills and abilities that my students have with digital technologies. So even though they were struggling often with reading, the tasks that they had to do online, they had skills that were already there, that they had from either from their personal phones or game systems that they had at home, or digital devices that they were familiar with using. For instance, iPads that we had in the school. And so they may also have good skills with navigating websites, and then, of course, finding their areas of interest in those, whether it could be a video creation website or some type of animation like the Voki that we looked at, or audio. And so audio would be another way that students could engage with something that they may have skills with. And then it really helped to build their confidence. in completing the tasks that they had to do for the assignments. It also, they were willing to help and share with other students as they went through the process, and that engaged them in this learning and meaning making with each other. And so in the discussions of the stories and the questions that were posed, and then in the way they responded with the digital options, the multimedia assignments, it allowed them to gain that confidence to participate in the process of learning with the other students in the class. And so I want to, again, I have the same Padlet ready for you to link in and share your ideas that you might have and how you engage your students in personalized learning. And go to this Padlet. And again, as I said, from now till September 1st, you can come back and look at what other people have shared and learn from that and continue the conversation and the learning process. And the last section I wanted to talk about was online literature discussion and media. Some of this you've already seen a little bit of as I was talking through the other sections. So I wanted to share, as the students started the research part of the project online, this is one of the vocies that I shared with them for that part. Again, let me get the camera off and the mic. So
welcome. To begin your journey, follow the links on the icons or sidebar to explore topics about my country. With your team, create a presentation using the Prezi link. Each project must include facts about one topic from each page and include examples you found of that idea used in the modern world. Good luck with your project.
So that was actually a lot of fun for me too, creating these vocies to share these instructions with them, and it was fun to find things that related to the story, characters that were in the story like Muffin, to give the instructions for them, and then the sound and the vocal, the different vocals that are embedded in the program. It was really fun to play with. All right, let me go back to slideshow. Okay. Some of the basic components. So after reading, the students responded to questions that were embedded in the website, and then they would post their answers and respond to other students in those questions. So I did have that chat feature embedded with questions that I wanted them to answer and share their answers related to the story and what they were learning from the story. And then I had them also do some projects together, creating different videos, or like we used Animoto.com, very short videos that answered a particular question that they had in relating to the book. Or they had Toon-Do we used for cartoon comic strips to do a scene from the story, and it would further explain something that they learned from the story. And then again, the discussions that were built into each of those sections, they allowed them to share what they were learning from each other and to explain further what they meant by their comic strip if someone didn't understand or had a question. So it gave them that opportunity for that discussion. And then I also had them do a further research project related for the social studies part of that. And then they had another vocie there. And I'll share that one as well. Let me get the
If you believe yourself to be brave enough, select and answer one of the following questions through your own conjured demon, aka video avatar. Number 1. What does it take for Set to accomplish building the pyramid? Number 2. How did pyramids get built in ancient Egypt? Number 3. How might the two processes be similar? Number 4. How might the two processes be different? Copy your vocie link and post to the wiki. If you answer well, perhaps you will survive.
So this character was one of the characters that was revealed toward the end of the story, and of course, I used them to help get them engaged in extending their understanding of what we learned about ancient Egypt's building of the pyramids, the different pyramids that were built, and then to connect that to the story. Rick Riordan did a lot of research. It was obvious as the story was written and the things that he included in that, and so it gave a chance for them to extend their learning and to make that connection. And so it was really a cool project, and they were very much engaged in that learning process. And of course, the reading, not only the reading of the text itself and the story, but it was also being involved in reading the research online with informational text relating to it. And so again, I would like to give you an opportunity here to go back to the Padlet and share some ideas on how you may conduct online literature discussion, online literature responses. Maybe this year through the pandemic, there have been some new technologies that have been revealed or experiences that you've had that you didn't have in the past. And I would love for you to share that. Some folks may still be dealing with online learning or hybrid situations as we go into the next school year. And it would be great if there were some more technologies and ideas that could be shared for folks to be able to engage their readers, their reluctant readers in their classroom. So going back to that question, reading don't get you no deer, that statement. And my question is, are you sure about that? Because, you know, our topic today, we look back at redefining literacy. Looking at all forms of literacy, we can help students to develop literacies and skills in different ways that they can be literate. And then engaging, finding high interest activities and topics for them to read. Knowing your students can help you to guide them in meaningful reading experiences. And so that hopefully that will give you some ideas there to help get the students engaged and find the reading books or topics that they would enjoy learning more about. And then agency through activity, finding ways to help students take control of their learning process and utilize skills that they have, that they already have to help them in that process to learn, and engaging them in that process to become a reader and to engage that. And then online literature discussion and media, just a framework for developing understanding and learning from each other in some way of self-expression. And with this topic, you know, there are books about deer. The students can certainly look up that are interested in hunting, and there's literate ways that they can be active in hunting and processing the animals for food or for clothing or and so that would be a way to engage them in skills that they may have. How do you put a gun together? How do you clean the gun, take it apart, and put it back together safely? How do you have hunter safety? And what are the ways to be literate when a student's hunting out in you know, in the woods? What are the processes for doing that safely and to be successful at hunting? And so again, giving them opportunities to do that and to connect that. If you know that they're interested in finding those ways to connect what they already know to the reading experience is really important. So I encourage you to do that. I have got my email listed here on this slide. If you have any questions, further things that I could answer, or any other ideas that you would like to share with me through the email, you're welcome to use that. And I really hope that you will enjoy, that you've enjoyed this presentation and that you will participate in the QR codes to the Padlet so that you can share and continue to learn as the summer goes on. Thank you.